Okay, so the next part of the algebra chapter, so the very first algebra chapter in the Leaving Cert, deals with algebraic fractions. Now, these are the more straightforward fractions, but from experience, people tend to not like fractions or have a bit of a kind of mental block about fractions. Um, so we'll work through these. And you can just see here I have lowest common denominator written here. So for example, if we weren't talking about algebraic fractions and we were just talking about adding or subtracting normal fractions, so 3 over 8 plus 7 over 12, first thing we would have to try find is the lowest common denominator. So the top part of the fraction is called the numerator and the bottom part of the fraction is called the denominator. So in order for us to be able to add or subtract a fraction, the denominator has to be the same here. Okay, so there's a couple of ways we can do this. First of all, we're trying to look at the lowest common denominator. So 8 and 12 would have a lowest common denominator of 24. Okay, so what you could do is multiply all of the left-hand side here. Okay, so all of this fraction by something that will bring the denominator up to 24. So we know 3 times 8 is 24. So we multiply the top and the bottom here by 3. So 3 by 3 is 9 and 3 by 8 is 24. And on the right hand side, in order to make 12 become 24, we know we would multiply it by 2. So we have to multiply the top and the bottom by 2. So 2 by 7 is 14 and 2 by 12 is 24. And now that you can see we have the two denominators the same, so the lowest common denominator, we can now just add the two numerators and keep the same denominator. So we have 24, okay, and 9 plus 14 is 23. So your answer there will be 23 over 24. So that's just looking at basic fractions, so it's non-algebraic fractions. And in order to add or subtract, we need to look at having the same denominator. So we're going to apply the exact same idea to algebra now. So if we look here, we have y over 8 plus y over 4. So the denominator here, the lowest common denominator here will be 8. 4 and 8, lowest common denominator will be 8. So what this means is we don't need to make any changes here on the left-hand side because 8 is already the lowest common denominator. But on the right-hand side, the denominator needs to become 8. Now we have 4 here, so we would multiply all of this side by 2. So the sum now becomes y over 8 plus 2 times y is 2y and 2 times 4 is 8. So now that we have the same denominator, we are allowed to add or subtract these fractions. If we have y, we know that y is the same as 1y. So we've 1y plus 2y is 3y over 8. Okay? So we're just simplifying these fractions where we can, adding and subtracting them. All right. Next example, we have denominators 3 and 7. So the lowest common denominator here would be 21. Okay, so lowest common denominator is 21. So if we look at the left-hand side, okay, in order to make 3 become 21, we're multiplying all of the left-hand side by 7, okay, and we're multiplying all of the right-hand side by 3. So from here, we multiply the top by 7, so 7 by 2 is 14x, and 7 by 3 is 21, plus 3 by 7 is 21 again, and 3 by 4x, so 3 by 4 is 12x. Okay, and what we end up with here is 14 plus 12 is 26x over 21. And we just leave it like that, even though it ends up as an improper fraction, that's fine. Okay, so improper fraction is where the numerator is greater than the denominator, and that's fine in this situation here with algebra. So let's look here. We've a little bit more going on, as you can see. There's now more terms in the expression at the top here. Okay, we only had one term here as the numerator. Now we have more than one term. So this is going to require a little bit more multiplication here in algebra, which is based on the last part of what we did in the last video. Okay, so here again, we can see our numerators are our denominators here are 5 and 3. Now for us to be able to add or subtract all of these terms, it means that the denominator must be the same. And the lowest common denominator here would be 15. So we're going to multiply all of the left-hand side by 3, because 3 by 5 will give us 15. And we're going to multiply all of the right-hand side by 5, because 5 by 3 gives us 15. So let's do that to each part. So we've 3 by 4a, so 3 by 4 would be 12a. Okay, 3 by 1 is 3, and 3 by 5 is 15. On this side here, 5 by 3a is 15a. 5 by minus 1 is minus 5. And 5 by 3 gives us 15. Okay, now we're just going to ignore these questions for the moment. I'll move on to a different page because I'm going to need this space here. So what we're looking at is an A term and an A term and a constant and a constant. So if you remember in the last part, we could only add and subtract like terms. So here what we have is 12a plus 15a is 27a, and we've plus 3 minus 5. So remember, we were talking about our money here. So if we have €3 and we subtract €5, we now owe somebody €2. And the same denominator just comes together. So our answer here will be 27a minus 2 over 15. And this is important here to remember that we've an A term and a constant, so they are not like terms, therefore they cannot be added together. So your final answer looks like this. Now I'm going to show you similar examples to this one here, but we're going to look at maybe a slightly different method that you might have seen before. Okay, so I just want to show you two different methods. So this is what you possibly have seen before, and it's similar idea. Okay, still talking about the lowest common denominator, but this time we're actually going to introduce the lowest common denominator straight away and not multiply each of the terms. So the lowest common denominator here for 8 and 3, okay, lowest common denominator, we saw this earlier, for 8 and 3 would be 24. So we're actually going to rewrite the denominator now as 24. And what we do is we divide in the old denominator into the new denominator. So 8 divides into 24 3 times. And we're going to multiply the top part of the fraction, the numerator here, by 3. We've our minus in the middle here. We're going to now divide 3 into 24. So 3 into 24 goes 8 times, and 8 we multiply by all of the numerator here again. It's going to give you the exact same result, but it's just a different way. You may have seen this before. Okay, so from here we now need to look at what we have, which is the brackets. Now brackets tells us to multiply. So we are now looking at multiplying the outside term by every term inside the bracket, and the same on the other side, multiplying minus 8 by every term inside that bracket. Now when we're looking at the sign here in the middle, it's negative, so we need to be just a little bit more careful. So we've 3 by 3y, so 3 by 3 is 9y, and we've 3 by minus 1, so plus by minus is minus 3. And on the other side, we've minus 8 by 4y. minus multiplied by a plus gives minus. 8 by 4 is 32y. And then we have minus 8 by minus 5. Again, minus by minus this time gives us a plus. Okay, remember like signs give us a positive. And 8 by 5 gives us 40. And that's all over our denominator, which is 24. Now we're looking again here. We have our y terms and we have our constants. So we've 9y minus 32y. Okay, now I didn't have my calculator the last day, but I would always check stuff like this on my calculator. So 9 minus 32 is minus 23. So we've minus 23y. Okay, and then minus 3 plus 40, again very quickly on your calculator, minus 3 plus 40, which you wouldn't always have to do on the calculator, but there is no harm to check them, and it gives us plus 37. So we've minus 23 plus 37 over 24, and that's our final answer because we can't simplify any further when we have a y term and a constant. Okay. Now the next example, you can see similar idea, but the only thing is there's now another term added on here. So we need to look at the lowest common denominator for all three denominators now. Now the lowest common denominator here would be 24. And the reason for that is 24 divides into 24, 12 divides into 24, and 3 divides into 24. And remember, they have to divide in evenly. Okay, there can't be any remainders here. So from here, our new denominator again is 24. We divide the old denominator into the new denominator. So 12 divides into 24 twice, and we're going to multiply all of that numerator by that 2. We've a minus 24 divides into 24 once, and we're multiplying by x minus 2. And we've another minus 3 divides into 24 8 times, and we're multiplying by our 2 on the top. So that's what that should look like every time. Again, we can see we've our brackets here. So when we have our brackets, we have to multiply the outside term by every term inside the brackets. It doesn't matter how many terms are inside the brackets, but you have to multiply every term by the brackets. So 2 by 4x is 8x. 2 by minus 2, so we've plus by a minus is minus, and 2 by 2 is 4. Minus 1 by x is minus 1x, and minus 1 by minus 2, minus by minus is plus, and 1 times 2 is 2. And then last here we've minus 8 by 2, which is minus 16. And that's all over 24 again. We've an 8x minus 1x. We've minus 4 plus 2 minus 16. So 8x minus 1x is simply 7x. Minus 4 plus 2 minus 16. So again, you could just throw that into the calculator. Minus 4 plus 2 minus 16 gives us minus 18. Okay, and that's all over 24. And again here, we can't add or subtract that any further because at this point here, we've an x term, we have a constant, and they can't add because they are not like terms. Okay, so I'm going to stop that there before we move on to the next section. That was all dealing with algebraic fractions. Again, it follows the basics of adding and subtracting fractions, even if it wasn't algebraic. So it's the same principles, just a little bit more complicated when we've algebra involved.